We've been watching Marvel characters for years, and some of them didn't just grow, they broke, rebuilt themselves, and became someone completely unrecognizable from who they were at the start. Today, I'm going to talk about the character arcs that hit the hardest, what shaped them, what they lost, and why their journeys still stick with us long after the credits roll. Before we start, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications for more content. Enjoy the video. Peter Parker. When Peter Parker first shows up in the MCU, he's a kid from Queens who just wants Tony Stark to notice him. That's basically his whole motivation. He wants to be an Avenger. He wants the suit, the missions, the validation. And honestly, for a while, he's kind of distracted. He's worried about homecoming, about impressing his friends, about MJ, about fitting in at school, normal teenager stuff. And that's what makes him so likable. He's not brooding. He's not haunted. He's just a kid who happened to get superpowers and thinks it's the coolest thing in the world. But Marvel slowly strips that innocence away. He watches Tony die. He gets blipped out of existence and comes back to a world that moved on without him. Peter faces the worst version of this lesson. The only way to protect everyone he loves is to erase himself from their memories. Not die for them, not fight for them, just disappear. MJ doesn't know him. Ned doesn't know him. He walks into a coffee shop and the girl he loves looks right through him. He chooses to let it stay that way. That's not a kid trying to be an Avenger anymore. That's someone who understood what sacrifice actually costs when you survive it. Black Widow. Natasha Romanoff spent most of her life as a weapon, trained from childhood, stripped of choices, turned into someone whose only skill was manipulation and violence. By the time she defects and joins S.H.I.E.L.D., she's carrying a ledger she knows she can never fully erase. That phrase, "read in my ledger," isn't just a line. It's the foundation of her entire arc. Everything Natasha does from that point on is an attempt to balance a debt she believes she owes the world. She doesn't talk about it much. She doesn't make grand speeches. She just shows up, mission after mission, putting herself in the line of fire for people she's chosen to call family. And that's the key word, chosen. The Avengers become the first real family she's ever had. Not assigned, not manufactured, chosen. So, when the moment comes on Vormir, and someone has to die for the Soul Stone, Natasha doesn't hesitate. Clint fights her on it, physically tries to stop her, but she's already made the decision. She's not dying out of guilt. She's dying because, for the first time in her life, the debt is clear, and the payment is simple. One life for the universe, one life for the people she chose. It's quiet, it's brutal, and it's the most honest thing she ever does. Doctor Strange. Stephen Strange before Kamartaj is one of the most unlikable characters in the MCU, and that's entirely by design. He's a world-class neurosurgeon who knows he's world-class and makes sure everyone else knows it too. His ego isn't subtle. He picks cases based on how impressive they'll make him look. He corrects colleagues mid-surgery. He's brilliant, yes, but his brilliance is wrapped in so many layers of arrogance that there's almost no person underneath, just a reputation. The car accident doesn't humble him. Not at first. He burns through his fortune chasing a fix, a cure, a way back to being the man he was, because he can't imagine being anyone else. It's the Ancient One who finally cracks that shell, not through power, but through perspective. She shows him that the universe doesn't revolve around his hands, and her death drives it home. She spent centuries bending rules to protect the world and still couldn't outrun time. Strange learns that control is an illusion, that the point isn't to be the best, but to serve something bigger. But here's what makes Strange fascinating. In other universes, that lesson never lands. Sinister Strange, Strange Supreme, these are versions where the ego and the curiosity go unchecked, and the result is terrifying. The same mind that saves our reality destroys others. Scarlet Witch. Wanda's story is built on loss, and every chapter adds another layer. She starts as a girl in Sokovia who watches a Stark Industries missile sit unexploded in her living room for 2 days while she and her brother wait to die. That moment plants a hatred so deep that she volunteers for Hydra experiments just for the chance to destroy Tony Stark. That's where she begins, not as a hero, not as a villain, but as someone defined entirely by pain. Then she loses Pietro, her twin, the one person who shared every moment of that trauma. She fights through it and joins the Avengers, choosing to protect the world that took everything from her. She falls in love with Vision, an android who somehow makes her feel human again, and then she has to watch him die. Twice. Once by her own hand. The Westview incident isn't a supervillain plot. It's grief with unlimited power. She doesn't build that reality out of malice. She builds it because she can't carry the weight anymore. And when the Darkhold gets its hooks into her, the transformation into the Scarlet Witch isn't sudden. It's the natural destination of someone who was never allowed to heal. Every door she opened led to more pain, and eventually she stopped looking for doors and started tearing through walls. Wolverine. Logan's arc is hard to talk about in a straight line because that's the point his timeline is fractured. His memories are unreliable, and half the time he doesn't know which version of his past is real. He's been experimented on, wiped, rebuilt, and dumped back into the world so many times that trust isn't just difficult for him, it's almost biologically impossible. When we first meet him in most versions of his story, he's feral, not metaphorically. He fights in cages, he drinks alone, he moves through the world like an animal that happens to look human. He doesn't want friends, he doesn't want a team, he barely wants to be alive. What the X-Men give him, slowly and painfully, is something he's never had. A reason to stay, not a mission, not a fight, a home. These people don't fix him, but they give him a context for existing that goes beyond survival. Over time, he turns into a hero who would die to save the future of mutants. And the variant in Deadpool and Wolverine becomes a hero who saves the entire universe, even though he failed at everything and was responsible for his friends' deaths. It's the story of a careless man turning into a hero. Charles Xavier. Charles Xavier, in his younger years, is idealistic to the point of recklessness. He's gifted, charming, privileged, and he genuinely believes that humans and mutants can coexist if someone just makes the right argument. It's a beautiful vision, but it's also naive, and his early decisions reflect that. He makes mistakes rooted in arrogance. Not malicious arrogance, but the quiet kind that comes from believing you always know best. He hides things from the people closest to him. He manipulates minds when he thinks the cause justifies it. He puts students in danger because he's so certain the mission is righteous. What ages Xavier into the leader we respect isn't success, it's failure. It's watching students die. It's losing Eric over and over to an ideology he can't argue away. It's realizing that his dream of peace might never fully arrive and choosing to pursue it anyway. The older Xavier, the one in the wheelchair, the one who speaks softly, the one who welcomes broken people into his school, that man exists because the younger version made every mistake in the book and decided to learn from all of them. He becomes wise not because he was born wise, but because he earned it the hard way. Magneto, Eric Linshair's origin is one of the most grounded and devastating in all of Marvel. He doesn't become radicalized by comic book logic, he becomes radicalized by history. A child in a concentration camp who watches his family destroyed, who experiences the absolute worst of what humanity is capable of, and then discovers he's part of a new minority that humanity is already learning to fear. His conclusion isn't irrational. That's what makes him so compelling. When Eric says humans will never accept mutants, he's not making a theoretical argument. He's speaking from lived experience. And the tragedy of his relationship with Charles is that neither of them is entirely wrong. Charles believes in coexistence. Eric believes in survival at any cost. They love each other, they respect each other, and they can't stop fighting each other because their traumas led them to opposite conclusions. Magneto's arc isn't a fall from grace. It's a man who was never given grace to begin with, trying to build safety the only way he knows how. The helmet, the brotherhood, the war, it all comes from a place of protection, twisted by pain into something that often looks like the very thing he's fighting against. And he knows it. That awareness, that flicker of doubt, is what keeps Magneto human. Deadpool. Wade Wilson is chaos with a healing factor, and for a long time that's all he needs to be. He breaks the fourth wall. He makes jokes during fights. He treats the entire superhero genre like a bit he's doing. And honestly, it works. He's hilarious. But underneath all that noise, there's something quieter going on. Wade actually wants to belong somewhere. He wants to be an Avenger. Gets rejected. He wants to be taken seriously. Nobody does. He acts like he doesn't care, but the jokes are armor. And the armor is thick, because what's underneath is a guy who's been disfigured, abandoned, and told repeatedly that he doesn't fit the mold. The Deadpool and Wolverine direction takes this further. Wade isn't just cracking jokes anymore, he's trying to save an entire timeline, an entire universe. And the guy who built his whole identity around not caring suddenly has to care more than anyone. He has to be the hero he always mocked. The selfish, chaotic, irreverent mercenary has to learn what sacrifice looks like when there's no punchline at the end. It doesn't erase who he is. He's still Wade. But there's a version of Wade now who stepped up when it counted, and that version is harder to laugh off. Steve Rogers. Steve Rogers is the moral center of the MCU, and that's both his greatest strength and his most interesting flaw. He comes from the 1940s with a compass that always points toward doing the right thing, and for most of his story, that compass holds. He's the guy who jumps on the grenade, the guy who won't compromise, the guy who says, I can do this all day and means it every single time. But Steve isn't perfect, and the films are smart enough to show that. He lies to Tony about Bucky killing his parents. He knows the truth and holds it back because telling Tony would mean losing Bucky, and Steve isn't willing to make that trade. That's not noble. That's a man choosing his friend over his teammates' right to know how his parents died. After they made peace, he took on a leadership role in Endgame. He loved Tony enough to cry for him, and in the last part of his story that we're shown, he went back to the past to finally live his own life. That decision most likely set the stage for the incursions that will happen in the Doomsday movie. So what do you think? Did Steve go back only thinking about himself? I don't think so. We don't know what Steve went through in the background. He always thought about others. Tony Stark. Tony Stark begins his story selling weapons to the highest bidder and calling it peace. He's arrogant, reckless, and completely insulated from the consequences of his actions by money and charm. The cave in Afghanistan cracks that insulation wide open. He sees his own weapons being used to destroy the people they were supposed to protect, and for the first time in his life, the math doesn't work out in his favor. Building the suit isn't just survival, it's his first real attempt at accountability. But Tony doesn't become a saint overnight. He's still ego-driven. He still builds Ultron because he thinks he's the smartest person in the room. He still pushes people away. The difference is that each failure teaches him something, and unlike the old Tony, the new one actually listens. The relationship with Pepper grounds him. Having Morgan transforms him. By the time Endgame arrives, Tony is no longer the guy chasing glory in a metal suit. He's a father with everything to lose, sitting in a cabin, knowing the answer to time travel and wishing he didn't. He could stay. He could let someone else figure it out, but he can't, because the version of Tony Stark that survived all those failures isn't capable of looking away anymore. The snap that kills him isn't a gesture. It's the final line of an arc that started in a cave with a box of scraps. A man who spent his whole life building things, finally giving everything away. Thor Thor starts as the guy who solves every problem with a hammer. He's loud, confident, powerful, and completely convinced that being the strongest means being the best. Asgard treats him like a prince, and he acts like one brash, impulsive, ready to start a war because someone insulted his honor. Getting banished to Earth is the first time the universe tells Thor no, and he doesn't handle it well. But losing Mjolnir forces him to confront something he's never considered, that worthiness isn't about strength. It's about who you are when the strength is gone. He earns the hammer back not by fighting harder, but by being willing to die for people he barely knows. And then Marvel does something rare they keep pushing. Thor loses his mother, his father, his hammer again, his home, his brother, half his people. By Endgame, he's broken. He's gained weight, he's drinking, he's playing video games in a dark house in Norway, and the God of Thunder looks like the last person who could save anyone. But he's still worthy. That moment, summoning Mjolnir in the past and realizing he's still worthy, is Thor learning that failure and grief don't disqualify you. His father's path was one of wisdom learned late, and Thor follows it. He gives up the throne, he finds the Guardians, he becomes a father figure to love. The warrior becomes a wanderer, and the wanderer becomes a parent, and somehow, that journey makes more sense than the crown ever did. Loki. Loki begins as the easiest character to dismiss. He's the jealous brother, the schemer, the one who wants the throne not because he'd be a good king, but because Thor has it and he doesn't. His motivations in the first Thor film are almost entirely petty sibling rivalry, weaponized by a lifetime of feeling second best. In the Avengers, he shows up with an army and a speech about freedom being a lie, but even then, he's performing. He's a god of mischief playing the role of conqueror because he thinks that's what power looks like. But the layers were always there. Loki discovers he's adopted. He discovers he's Frost Giant, the very thing Asgard taught him to hate. His entire identity cracks in a single conversation, and nothing he does afterward makes sense until you understand that he's not chasing a throne. He's chasing proof that he matters. That's the engine underneath every betrayal, every scheme, every dramatic entrance. He wants someone, anyone, to look at him and say, he's enough. Thor does, eventually. And watching Loki process that, watching him go from stabbing his brother in the back to standing in front of Thanos and calling himself an Odin's son, knowing it will kill him, is one of the most earned moments in the entire MCU. He dies for his brother. The trickster, the liar, the god who never meant a word he said, dies telling the truth. But the Loki variant story goes even further. Ripped out of his timeline, thrown into the TVA, stripped of every illusion he ever hid behind, this version of Loki has to confront who he is without the crown, without Asgard, without Thor, and he does something the original Loki never got the chance to do. He grows in real time. He learns that glorious purpose isn't something you take, it's something you become. And in the end, he doesn't sit on a throne, he becomes one. He holds the multiverse together, alone, forever. Not because anyone asked him to, but because he's the only one who can. The god who spent his whole life demanding to be seen chooses to disappear. The boy who wanted a throne becomes the man who becomes the tree at the center of everything, and he does it quietly. No audience. No applause, no mischief, just purpose. That's not a character arc, that's a masterpiece. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button. And if you're not subscribed yet, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Which character's development affected you the most? Drop it in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.